Well, Lord bless you this morning, and I trust this will be a great day for you. There's no snow outside, so it's got to be good. It's always good when that happens. So today, there's another. Last week I spoke to you about Saul, the Amalekites, and the story that he disobeyed God. He was supposed to remove these Amalekites because, if you remember, right? Well, I'll explain that in just a minute, but he didn't obey. He didn't do what he was supposed to do. And as a result of that, he lost the kingdom. He lost the blessing of the Lord on his life. He was rebellious. He never did repent, which of course would have changed everything had he done so. Because God said that. He says, if you repent, I'll forgive you your sins. I'll wash you. He never did. So he reaped the consequences of that. But there's a part B now to the story. And that's what I want to cover today. Part A was his disobedience and him leaving a small little thing that he didn't do. And now there's a consequence to that, and that's what part B is today. To tell you what that consequence is. So it has to do with a female who's going to deal with this. So I thought, well, it's appropriate to talk about women today, talk about the wonderful impact that God has used through males and females, that his kingdom will come, his will be done. He will decide, and he will work through males, he'll work through females. It doesn't matter. He's not a respecter of genders. He will use anybody whose heart is opened. And so today, as we talk about Mother's Day and just the wonderful things that, even as we look back on our lives and can look back at mothers that have looked after us and guided us. So God used this female at this time of her life to fix a problem. Fix a problem. So let's kind of go back. In fact, she's, well, as you can see on the slide, it's about Esther. We all know the book of Esther. It's a book, it's specifically about her and this incident. In fact, she is so influential. She is so influential that 2,500 years later, she's actually still being celebrated. How many of you have heard of the Feast of Purim? That's a feast that celebrates her. The Jews are celebrating that, and I can't remember when it is, if it's October, somewhere around in the fall, but there's a Feast of Purim that celebrates what she did 2,500 years later. But here's what you probably didn't know, and I'm going to explain it in just a minute. We actually also should be celebrating her today, because you see, she preserved the nation that brought us the Messiah. She preserved the nation that was going to go through a Holocaust. She preserved a nation that brought us the Messiah. So that's how influential she is. So let's find out what happened. Let's find out what is her story, and in a sense, how does that apply to us today, 2,500 years later? Remember I said last week, these stories are there for a reason. There's something to give us a principle for the future, for our life today. However, thousands of years later, it still applies. So, there's a lot of levels to this story, but I want to talk primarily about the level of looking at dealing with incomplete obedience and the courage it takes to finish a job that may not have been your battle to start with. There's moments in I bet in all of our lives, we can probably look back on a moment that we are now dealing with, that we inherited somebody else's issues, somebody else's problem that they didn't deal with, and now you're inheriting it. I bet there's almost every one of us at some point we can look back and go, oh yeah, or we're in it now. So how does she deal with it? Well, let's go back to the story. Let me just recap a little bit about Saul, because Esther's 500 years removed from Saul. So if you remember, and I put it into your notes there, so I'm not going to read the whole story. because that's quite long, so I'm going to capsulate it a little bit. So when you go back today, read it. It's 1 Samuel 15 is the Saul story, and then Esther's story that I'm going to cover today is between chapters 3 and chapter 9 of the book of Esther. So please read that today, and you'll see where I'm going with this. But let's just give you a recap. Saul was the king, and he was given the responsibility to look after Israel, to guide Israel, and then he was told by Samuel, you've got a job to do, and you better do it, because it's critical. You've got to destroy the Amalekites. All of it. Destroy them. And right away, most people will think, oh, yeah, what in the world is God doing? He's so mean, he's so vile, he's so, how could he do this? Da-da-da-da-da. But if you remember right, I think I told you why. The Amalekites were the type of people that actually, if you remember from last week, they actually represent the work of the enemy, Satan. Why is that? Because when Israel left Egypt, if you remember, they left vulnerable. They didn't have weapons. They didn't have nothing to protect them in the sense of, weapons or an army or anything. They're just a new nation. They've come out of this slavery. And the Amalekites, who were descendants of Esau, they already had an angst against Israel because of what Jacob did. Took supposedly the birthright away, while Esau gave it up. He despised what God was going to give him. And as a result, it seemed like it went into the DNA of that line, and it became the Amalekites. And so here's what they did. They had no regard for God, and they came against Israel and went after the most vulnerable. The people who are weak, the people who are the stragglers, they're not strong enough, so they're in the back over here, and the Amalekites in their evil ways decided, they're weak, they're vulnerable, we're going to get them. Well, what a bunch of cowards! What a bunch of cowards! So they go after the weak and the vulnerable, and God, in his faithfulness, he says, I'm not going to let that go. I'll give you the strength to overcome this, but I am not going to let that go. One day, I'm going to require it of them, and I'm going to destroy them. Because, you see, the point is this. The Amalekites, as I said last week, they represent evil. They represent the enemy. They're always trying to look for who's vulnerable. They're trying to look for who's weak in their faith or who's weak at that moment of time. How many times have you been sort of like maybe not reading or praying enough, and all of a sudden you can tell that the enemy's coming after you? And he'll do it in a number of different ways. He doesn't care. He has no regard for you or for courage. He's terrible in all of his ways. And so these Amalekites represented that. So God rightly said, you've got to get rid of these people, or they are going to do this for generation after generation, and I want it stopped now because they're evil in every way, right through even in their DNA. It's like generation after generation did this. However, if you remember from last week, Saul didn't obey. Oh, he did. Let's just say he did 99% obedience, but he didn't do the full thing. He wasn't fully obedient to God. Did some, but not all of it. So, here's the issue with that. When you leave a little sin, a little moment, a little disobedience, at some point, it'll grow to be a bigger consequence. It won't stay little. It's got to be dealt with. It's just like when you have a big fire and you put it out, but what if a little ember is left? Just a little ember. Oh, I didn't quite see that. Oh, there it is. It's still smoldering a little bit. And eventually it starts growing and growing and growing. And sometimes those little embers can actually be a bigger fire than what was put out. Remember the whole Fort Mac fires and all of that happened? I mean, we saw powerful fires. But you know what they were scared of? It's not just the fact that they saw the fire that was happening. What they were worried about most is the little embers that didn't get put out. Because later on, they could be a real problem. And so was this disobedience that Saul had. See, if you don't deal with it when it's small, you'll face it when it's strong. One day. So we must be diligent. So here's the point of that. We must be diligent in our life that when God points a finger on something, either in your life or something that He's requiring of you to do, we need to be fully obedient. We need to obey what He's calling us to do so that it doesn't bite you down the road or bite your family down the road. Because disobedience doesn't just hide itself in one area, it grows in other areas. So now, he's missed this opportunity purposely, left a little sin, left a little moment uncompleted. Now 500 years later, Israel is in exile. They're under the Persian Empire, and this Persian Empire, they're scattered throughout the empire, and it's a huge thing. I mean, it's the biggest empire in that time. And they are under exile of this Persian Empire. So, this new generation, 500 years later, is going to have to deal with something that Saul left undone. So enter the orphan Esther. She was an orphan. Parents died. She was looked after by her cousin, the older cousin, quite a bit older. Could have been her uncle. He's looked after. His name is Mordecai. Mordecai, if some of you like that word. Mordecai, I'm just going to say Mordecai. He's raised by her. But here's the point. She had a heart that was submissive. She had a heart that realized, oh yeah, he's looking after me. I'm going to respect his authority. I will come under his authority. I'm going to learn and be raised by him and listen to what he has to say. And it's because of that, she was raised to prominence. She was respectful of her great cousin that looked after her. Obeyed. And because of that, God raised her to prominence. Do you remember another great king that was raised to prominence from humble beginnings? David. Very much the same. Very much the same. God lifted him up and he was humbly looking after sheep. She's just an orphan. Who's this? It's us. Who's this? Oh, Mordecai's cousin. We don't know who she is, but she's a nice girl. But God's hand was upon her. And so through various circumstances, which again is in that story, read it later, but she gained favor and now she is queen. Now she's queen of the biggest empire. The king is there, and she's, the consort there with him, of the biggest empire in the world. Except now something's going to happen. There's a man called Haman who's going to get raised up through various, however means. He stepped here, stepped there, went to this rail, went to, higher and higher and higher, and finally he got lifted up till he was very much close to the king of the Persian Empire. His name was Haman. Now let me read you something. Well, here, let me give you a little idea of what his idea. He did not like Mordecai. And then, but not only that, he didn't like who his race was, the Jews. So he's trying to figure out, how do I get rid of Mordecai, but also get rid of these Jews? I hate them. They're just disrespectful to me. Whatever. Again, he's thinking of ways to destroy. So he thinks up this plan and he brings it to the king and he says, King, on this day, these people, they don't respect you. And so he hatched this plan, got the king to sign it, but here's what it meant. It meant that every Jew was going to be destroyed in all of the empire on one day, in this one day. It was a Holocaust. It was going to be a Holocaust because the whole nation would be destroyed. But here is the point. let me point out for you what it talks about who this Haman was. After these things, King Harazi promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite. The Agagite? Who was Saul supposed to destroy? Who did he save? King Agag. Now you know the survivors from King Agag were called Agagites. They were Amalekites. He kept this little line going. He was supposed to get rid of them. But now we got a big problem here. It wasn't just a little problem. Now it's a big problem. He wants to destroy a whole nation. And isn't it interesting? Just like his ancestors before him, he's doing the same thing. He's looking for where are they the most vulnerable? Where are they the weakest? They're not a nation surrounded by their borders or in safe cities with walls and armies that they have. They're scattered throughout the empire. They can't even hardly help each other. They're just scattered everywhere. Isn't that just like the enemy? Look for the most vulnerable. Look for when they're weakest. Then I can come after them. So he devises this plot, but he shouldn't even be there. Because of Saul's disobedience, a line was kept going, and now 500 years later, this isn't just a little thing. This is a big thing. So enter Esther. She's told about the plot, and she has, under direction of Mordecai, guidance. Kind of like, if I could say it to you this way, it's almost like he's representing the Holy Spirit, speaking to her. You got to do this because it's now resting on you. We'll work together, but we're going to do this together. So here's what happened. What did she do? She got really spiritual. She knew this was a problem. This was an issue. I got to deal with this. So what is said here of her in Esther 4:16? This is what's said. She says this: "Go gather all the Jews who are present in Shushan," that's the capital city, "and fast for me. Neither eat nor drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast likewise, and so I will go to the king, which is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." Folks, you know what she did? She was willing to stand in the gap for the nation. I'm going to fast for the nation. I'm going to pray for the nation. I'm going to ask God somehow to deal with this. See, she was asked by Mordecai, come on, you got to do something. So she didn't just go halfway in her obedience. She went all the way. Because what do you see at the end there? If I perish, I perish. See, Saul had the wrong idea. He was like, oh yeah, people, I got to let them do this because the people are going to be against me. He's a coward. Didn't obey because of his cowardice, and yet here's Esther. If I perish, I perish. I will be fully obedient to what you've called me to do. If I perish, I perish. But she doesn't just say that. I mean, she's praying, she's fasting, she wants to deal with this. She has courage to do what the Lord has told her to do. And then she doesn't say, stay silent. See, Mordecai comes to her and he says this: if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise from the Jews from another place, for the Jews from another place. In other words, God is faithful. He would have provided something, but he's calling her, just like Saul was called earlier. But you and your father's house will perish. Yet, who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for, what a famous line, such a time as this. Yes, she could have lost her life, but here's the thing. She didn't care. She didn't care. All she knew is she needed to obey, because this is a sin that wasn't dealt with back then. I've got to deal with it now, and if I perish, I perish. If I lose my life, I lose my life. You see, because you had to come into the king's presence invited. He didn't just go into the king's presence unannounced. She knew that. But in her boldness to obey what God has called her to do, she says, I'm going to do this. You see, she succeeded. The plan of Haman was exposed. And then his line was cut off. You never hear of the Amalekites again. It was now done, finished, because of what she did. She finished something that should have been done 5 years earlier. Now she obeyed, and it's dealt with. And here's what we get to do today, 2,500 years later. We not only have a nation that was spared, but we have a nation that was spared that provided us with the Messiah. Jesus was born of the Jews. He was born in Bethlehem. He was born because there was a nation that was protected by him, and he used Esther in full obedience to do so. Such a time as this. So here's what I want to propose to you. Here's what I want to say to you about that. You have been placed here for such a time as this. You know, I think a lot of times as Christians, as followers of Christ, we can often reminisce about back then. Boy, what it would have been like to be around when John Wesley was there. Oh, what would it have been Charles Finley? Oh, we start talking about the past, and what would it have been like back then? Oh, I wish I could have been there. Here's the reality, folks. You are here because God placed you here now. You are here for such a time as this. You're not just, there's only not just those little special moments in people over there, and they got here, and those people, oh yeah, they're special over here. No, you're here for such a time as this. In fact, you know, you're here for your family for such a time as this. You're here for the circumstances that God puts you in for such a time as this. You are here because God ordained your moment to be now. Not 100 years ago, not 200 years ago. You are here for a purpose now. And you are here for a purpose until the day God calls you home. There's no retirement in God's business. I think the worst thing that our society really has done has created this idea that we retire and sit on a couch and watch The Price is Right. What an abysmal life that is. God has never called you to that. He's called you to, we change, of course. Our physical bodies are things that are limits to us that we can't do as we age, but you can never stop praying. You can never stop interceding. You can never stop reading the Word and growing in Him. It is not a moment at 65 years old, I'm done. I'm even done spiritually. No, it's the day that you will take your last breath. Then you're done. Then your retirement begins. And it's the best retirement package you could ever imagine. Heaven in all of its glory. God looking after you. Talk about the social thing He's going to do. He's going to feed you. He's going to provide for you. He's got a mansion for you. Just move in. But we have something to do today. And you have something to do for your families. You have something to pray for. You have something to be encouraged in and purpose and living. You're the person that God has entrusted you to do today with your families, with friends. Whoever God brings into your life, you are there for such a time as that. To pray. We need prayer for our nations. We need prayer for leaders. We need prayer. Guess who He's risen up? It's not Esther today, it's you. It's Bill, it's Bob, it's Esther, it's Heidi, it's whoever. You are here for such a time as this to pray. But here's what I also want to ask you to do. And I close with this. I want you to ask yourself today, as we look at this woman of God and what she did, what she had to look after and deal with, ask yourself this: God, is there something left undone in my life. In my life. Your life. You need to ask God today, Lord, is there something undone in my life that you've asked me to do? What have I tolerated, God, that you have told me to confront? See, Saul tolerated Agag. You can stick around. And God told him no. Have we tolerated anything in our life that God has not? That He's confronted us with and said, no, I want you to deal with that. Or it's the little thing now, but it's going to be a big thing later. And here's the other thing that maybe you might not have thought of. You see, your spiritual decisions don't just affect you. They'll affect the generation after you. Decisions you make now will affect the generation after you. The things you don't deal with now in your life or in the family's life, eventually they'll have to deal with it. I even look in my own family. Some things that I know need to be done, or it's going to be an issue down the road. So God is calling us, obey fully. Whatever He's calling you to do, even if it means I perish. Even if people don't like me about it, even if I maybe lose a couple of friends, I don't know what it may mean. It'll cost. But there's things in our life that, first of all, God is calling us to do personally. Get rid of whatever He's called you to do. Maybe there's bitterness in your life. Maybe there's pride. Maybe there's an addiction. Maybe there's unforgiveness. Maybe there's spiritual laziness. Oh, I don't need to pray. Oh, I don't really need to. I've been reading the Bible. I don't need to do that anymore. Do you know what's going to happen? The next generation is watching you. How much are you praying? How much are you reading your word? How much do you speak about the Lord? How much is your mouth and your words used that are a little bit more refined than they used to be? They're watching. And when they see you make changes, it'll start to make thoughts in their mind. Maybe I need to do what Grandma and Grandpa are doing. Wow, look at how faithful they are to God, and look how God has been faithful to them. Maybe I need to do those kind of things. So here's the point today. Diane, if you could come. The point is this. Don't repeat Saul's mistakes. Live like Esther. Live like Esther. Do what God has called you to do, even if it's hard. Deal with things in your own life, because there's a blessing in that. There's hope in that. There's release in that. But also, it's good for the family. It's good for the family. You'll leave a legacy of obedience to God that they will follow down the road. They will follow